Tonight on Farage, we have an exclusive poll telling us about the popularity of Nicola Sturgeon's new gender laws. We'll ask, what's the point of a Tory party if they're now a high-tax party? I'll ask, is the ghost of COVID coming back to us from the Far East, and what should we do? And on Talking Pints tonight, I'm going to talk to somebody who leads a new political party. It's called the Climate Party, but is there room for it, given that we have the Greens already? All of that coming up in a couple of minutes, but first, let's get the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nigel, thank you. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. We've got some breaking news to bring you first, and Brazilian football legend Pelé has died. We understand his agent told AP. Considered one of the greatest footballers of all time, the star had been undergoing treatment for colon cancer. He was 82. The Defence Secretary says the UK's response to China opening up travel abroad is under review. Ben Wallace's comments follow the government saying there were no plans to introduce mandatory COVID-19 tests for arrivals from China, unlike several other countries, including the US and Italy. Beijing has announced plans to reopen borders next week, despite the country's ongoing COVID surge that sparked concern. The Defence Secretary also insisted UK borders are safe as the military steps in to cover for striking Border Force officials. Unions claim the country's borders are less secure as more than 1,000 immigration officers walk out in a dispute over pay. A senior source has told GB News that passport control operations are running very smoothly at all 6 airports. Meanwhile, Labour MP Khaled Mahmood has told us he would support a general strike.
Support the rights of the people to be able to strike. If they want to coordinate that, they're totally at will to do that. And if you don't call that a general strike, yes, because the people who work want to have the right sort of pay and conditions, and they should be able to do that.
A third man has been arrested on suspicion of murdering 23-year-old Cody Fisher on Boxing Day. The non-league footballer was stabbed to death in the Crane nightclub in Birmingham, which now faces closure. West Midlands police have said a 22-year-old man has been detained in London. He's the third person to be arrested on suspicion of murder, while 4 others have been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. Merseyside police have said a third person has been arrested in connection with the fatal shooting of a 26-year-old woman in Wirral. Elle Edwards was killed outside a pub on Christmas Eve. Police say a 31-year-old man from Tranmere has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. A man and a woman who were previously arrested are still being questioned by officers. And the deadly storm that's been sweeping across North America, killing at least 69 people, is now bringing wet and windy weather to the UK. The Met Office says the knock-on effect of America's bomb cyclone will see spells of unsettled weather over the next 7 to 10 days. Forecasters have issued an amber weather alert for heavy rain tomorrow for parts of Scotland, warning of flooding and travel disruption. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Farage.
Good evening. Well, it was just last week, wasn't it, that the new legislation passed in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon's new gender recognition laws. And just to remind you that anybody over the age of 18 who has lived in a different gender for a period of 3 months, and the proof of that apparently is that you've changed your pronouns, could legally change their gender. And from the age of 16, without any parental consent, and actually, more disturbingly, I thought, without any need for medical diagnosis, after 6 months, somebody could change their gender. There were supporters of this, of course. There is a very active trans lobby. Equally, there were quite a lot of protests as well, and worries expressed by some quite senior public figures that this may well endanger the safety of women. Now, some will say, well, women's safety is endangered by mad men already. Yes, that may well be true, but why add to the problem? Why allow certain people, predators, who, to go into changing rooms, women's prisons, or wherever else it may be? I also think that for people of that young age, this is a very, very confusing, difficult, and potentially quite dangerous thing to allow people easily to go into. So I was against those laws being passed. And I had a sense that the country too would not approve of this legislation. You see, the whole trans issue is a total obsession with the left in politics. Here in Britain, and that's been the case in America for several years already. Well, we have, through the company People Polling, got some exclusive polling where we've asked people across the United Kingdom, and that includes specifically in Scotland as well, whether they approve of the new gender laws. And the results are very clear. The results are very consistent. Only 1 in 5 adults in the United Kingdom approve strongly or to some degree with Nicola Sturgeon's new gender laws. Now, you may think, but it's bound to be different in Scotland. No, the figure in Scotland was 19%. 19% of people in Scotland agreed strongly or to some degree that Sturgeon had passed the right laws. So why has she done it? Well, it is about obsession. It is about some form of virtue signalling. It is about people, very often senior political figures, who are surrounded by very, very metropolitan figures in our big cities and are totally and hopelessly out of touch with the rest of the country. I am not here preaching a gospel of intolerance. Far from it. Let people be what they want to be. But I think to put in place legislation that allows people at will to chop and change their genders makes no sense at all and is dangerous, potentially very dangerous, I think, for young, confused people of 16 or 17 years old. So this result doesn't surprise me at all. It really doesn't. What did surprise me was a recent Prime Minister, Theresa May. And Theresa May, her initial response to it was that she thought we should have these laws for the rest of the United Kingdom. Apparently she's a Conservative, but we'll be debating in a minute what Conservatives actually are. She appears now to have backtracked on this. But don't think this is just a Scottish political issue, because it isn't. And the Conservatives will not go for it, whatever Mrs May happens to have said. Now, the real question here is, will the real Keir Starmer please stand up? Where do you stand on this? Because time and again, he's been skewered in interviews when asked to define what a woman is. He seems to find that incredibly difficult. And it's going to be a really big test of the Labour leader, whether he decides in a Labour manifesto to match what Nicola Sturgeon has done. There will be many within the Parliamentary Labour Party, many activists on the hard left of the party encouraging him to do this. We'll see what Starmer does. One thing for certain, this question, this debate isn't going to go away. And I very much doubt that figure of 20% will increase. Yes, there are young people coming out of university today who've been brainwashed with this stuff ever since primary school. But for the vast majority of the population, they do not agree with these changes. Let me know your thoughts, please. Do you support the new gender laws in Scotland? Farage at gbnews.uk. So let's get back to that Conservative Party. I've been asking a question here for the last few weeks about what is the point of the Conservative Party, and especially when it comes to taxation. The CEBR report that was out this week that said, a middle-class couple, both on reasonable but not huge incomes, could expect between them to pay another 40,000 quid in tax over the next decade. And the even crazier stat that, somebody, a single parent with 2 kids earning 50,000 a year, could get an increase over the next decade to 60,000 a year and keep only £800 of it. Marginal tax rates going into the 90s. I thought this was all the stuff of the late 1970s and a Labour Party that was heading for a total crash disaster in the election. But it's happening under a Conservative government. Today, the Daily Mail very much picked up on this story and said that a big review into taxation that Kwasi Kwarteng had ordered has now been kicked into touch by Jeremy Hunt. So in every manifesto, conference speech, big moments, the Tories stand up and tell us, or they have forever, I think, that they're the party of the small state and low tax. It would appear that is no longer the case. And how can it be, even approaching the next general election? I mean, what is Sunak going to do? Give us a small tax cut ahead of the next election and expect us to believe they've gone back to what they once were? I don't know. Joining me is historian and commentator Martin Whittock. Martin, the history of the Conservative Party. They've been around for about 200 years.
Ever since the Conservative Party splintered over the Corn Laws with Peel in the 1840s, so we're talking about that period, and even before that, the Conservative Party has been continually reinventing itself. Incidentally, Disraeli's Ministry of Sewage out-reformed Gladstone and the Liberals in the 19th century. So the Conservative Party is in many ways a chameleon party. It has been reforming itself and rechanging itself time and time again. It was a party that in many ways opposed the forming of the welfare state after the Second World War, but then became won over to that policy. It then became very much the party of the mixed economy in the 60s and early 70s. Since the 1970s, of course, and Mrs Thatcher, it's become very much the party of the lower taxation and the smaller state. But I think we shouldn't assume that's the only Conservative party that exists, because there is a one-nation Toryism which is prepared to countenance higher taxation and greater government intervention, and that also has its roots within aspects of the Conservative DNA as well. The Conservative Party at the moment, though, is asking the question of itself, what am I for?
I mean, within living memory, for the vast majority of voters, we know it as a party that has talked about lower taxes.
Yes.
Your point about there being chameleons is, of course, a very good one. But when you get a party that has crashed in the polls the way this one has since 2019, I mean, a really dramatic loss of support, and especially from newer Conservative voters, the Brexit, UKIP-y type voters. Is this just one of those historical periods where the Conservative Party does badly and then reinvents itself? Or is it possible? I mean, let's face it, the Liberals governed this country for many, many years. Indeed. And suddenly in 1918, after a great war, they're gone.
Yes.
And along comes a Labour Party and replaces them. Are they, I mean, is their crisis for identity so great that they could face one of those moments?
I personally feel that the Conservatives are facing an existential threat at the moment, in as much as having established themselves as the low-tax, small government party, they then collided with a COVID crisis, and I think a population that now has an appetite for government involvement and government expenditure. Now, not everybody will agree with this, and I think they've been caught by that, and I think they don't know what they are anymore, because I think out there are many people who felt that their response to COVID was correct in as much as supporting people through it, intervening through it, holding up the economy through it, all of which went against Thatcherite economics. And now, where do they go now?
And all of which has to be paid for.
Indeed. But I still think there's a popular appetite for intervention in public services and, in fact, reversing austerity, which, of course, we've had a decade of. And I think the Conservatives now face the challenge: are they going to continue with more of the same, or are they not? And if they're not going to do that, what's the difference between them and the Liberals or the Labour Party?
Yeah, I mean, as we face, the next election some way off, but the big battle lines are being drawn now, aren't they? You know, and you've got Wes Streeting. All right, he's not the Shadow Chancellor, but making very clear this week that Labour would not increase taxes on the middle classes. Actually, I mean, are there any ideological differences now between these two parties?
That's a very good question. I think the main ideological difference is that the Conservatives are doing this under pressure in terms of this increased governmental support, whereas I think Labour Party do it because they genuinely believe in it. I think that is a difference. But I think the kind of public appetite out there that has shown support for the nurses, for example, and I know it's a very complicated area, the whole strike situation at the moment. But I think that has indicated that people are prepared to see increase government expenditure for certain areas of the economy and the care industry in order to improve recruitment and retention. And I think that doesn't come cheap.
No, I think you're right. I think the country has got more used to government intervening in every aspect of our lives, and that has to be paid for, unless they can be led to believe in a different direction.
And that's the debate that will define the next 2 years.
And that's about leadership or followership. Martin Whittock, as ever, fascinating historical trawl there through a couple of hundred years of Conservative Party history. And yes, they have been very good at reinventing themselves. They even in 2019 told us they believed in Brexit. Haven't done much about that. Never mind. Well, let's go to a newspaper that has been the most supportive of the Conservative Party, certainly in the run-up to 2019 and that general election and since. I'm joined by David Maddox, the political editor of the Daily Express online. Now, David, your newspaper, both in print and online, you've been almost slavishly devoted to this Conservative Party, urging your readers that these are the right people to follow, and your readers, who many of whom have scrimped and saved and don't really want a big state. At least I don't think they want a big state. Perhaps they do. Perhaps things have changed. David, please answer the question: given what these taxes mean for small business, small entrepreneurs, anybody, frankly, working, facing the most extraordinary rise in taxes over the course of the next 6 or 7 years, please tell us from Express Towers what the point now of the Conservative Party actually is.
Well, I'm actually speaking to you from Brexit heartland in Dagenham, so I know you're very familiar with that part of the world. I think you slightly mischaracterise us there. It wasn't that long ago that we were telling people to vote UKIP and for the Brexit Party when you were the leader of those two great parties. We tend to be fairly pragmatic in our approach to, and certainly in 2019, what choice was there? It was Boris Johnson promising to get Brexit done, or Jeremy Corbyn with Keir Starmer basically trying to take us back into the EU. So, yeah, of course we supported them then. But I was just listening to that conversation there you were having with Martin. I was just remembering when you and I went to the US just before lockdown and the pandemic, and we were having a conversation with Senator Ted Cruz there. And, the two of you were saying, well, the Conservative Party is called the Conservative Party, but it's not actually very conservative. And it's hard not to agree with that. And it's not just the tax rises and so forth. It's also on social policy as well. I mean, that Theresa May thing was not an outlier by any means. There is a good chunk of the Conservative Party who would support that sort of view on the trans debate. And it's a party that happens to have Conservatives in it, most of whom are on the fringe, and that's a fact of it.
David, I wouldn't for one moment, of course, not want to acknowledge the amazing support the Express gave me as leader of both UKIP and the Brexit Party. You did, but, and I get your point about the choice against Jeremy Corbyn, but your readers are overwhelmingly on the Conservative side of the debate. If I was to ask you to speak to a group of Express readers and tell them what the differences now are between this Conservative Party and the Labour Party under Keir Starmer, what would you say?
I think it's very difficult now. It was a much easier job with that brief period when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. But, I look at Prime Minister's questions now, and essentially you look across the two, Starmer and Sunak, ideologically, you're looking at almost identical people. There are some small differences, certainly in rhetoric. I mean, Sunak's talking the talk on immigration control and things in words which Starmer would never use. But policy-wise, there's hardly anything between them. I was saying to one of your researchers earlier, it's that famous scene from the end of Animal Farm, when the animals are looking through the farmhouse window and they see the pigs and the humans and they can't tell the difference between the two of them. We're kind of, to a certain degree, in that space now with our two main parties.
On that thought, David Maddox, I'll say thank you and wish you all the best for 2023. Thank you for joining us this evening. In a moment, we'll get your reaction to that poll saying there is not much support, just 1 in 5, for Nicola Sturgeon's new gender laws. Back with you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, only 1 in 5 of the population in Scotland and the rest of the UK thinks the new gender laws in Scotland are the right thing to do. Only 1 in 5 supports them. Your thoughts on this coming in? You know, I asked you, do you support these laws? Heather says no, not at all. It's an absolute disgrace. In fact, everything that's happening in this country at present is a disgrace. Heather, I've got to tell you, you are absolutely not alone in thinking that. I can't remember a time when I've spoken to more people who feel more depressed or more angry, not just about the state the country's in, but about the lack of any real leadership. That's the thing people keep saying to me over and over and over. Kimmy says, 2 genders, that's all. Well, Kimmy, I think we need to face the fact there are some people who genuinely do have gender dysphoria. There have always been people in that category. As a percentage of the population, you know, it's 0.0 something. It's a tiny number of people. But the thing is, for that tiny number of people, all the rest of us are expected to change the way we speak, the way we address things. I was watching the cricket the other day, and I talked about the batsman. Oh no, I'm told, I can't say batsman anymore. I've got to say batter. I mean, for goodness sake. Ryan says no. I disagree entirely. In fact, I disagree with the entire idea of gender and that a man can become a woman. There are two sexes, male and female, and they cannot be changed. Well, as I say, in rare cases, they can be changed, but in general terms, they can't. Now, the COVID news that has been coming out of China over the last couple of weeks is alarming. Huge numbers, an estimated 250 million people in China have had COVID over the course of the last month. And just as alarming, we got the figures yesterday that in Japan, over 400 people had died in one day with COVID on their death certificates. So is the ghost of COVID coming back to haunt us? I'm joined by Dr. Chris Smith, virologist, and I have to say that you've done some amazing work over the course of the pandemic in, telling us what's going on, thenakedscientist.com. Chris, we're hearing that America are now putting travel restrictions on people coming in from China, that Italy are doing the same. Is COVID coming back to haunt us?
Well, COVID never went away. And what we're seeing really are the ripple effects of an ongoing evolution of a virus and a pandemic. It hasn't disappeared. And in this country, the UK, we've had about 1.5 million cases in the last week. What has changed is the level of immunity in the population. So where we previously were all vulnerable and all potentially vulnerable to getting seriously ill, your risk greater if you're in poor health already or older, now, thanks to vaccines and thanks to exposure, our risk is much, much lower. But it's a different story in China. This is a population who've been shielded away from the virus, almost like a log pile that's been kept under cover and is now bone dry, and one spark has ignited it, and unsurprisingly, with nothing to stop it burning, a fire is rampaging through, and that's exactly what we're seeing.
Well, it appears to be happening to some extent in Japan as well. Chris, I mean, the point about vaccines that you make, having the jab and having the boosters, it doesn't make us any less likely to catch COVID, does it?
The vaccines are very good initially at preventing infection. The evidence we have is that when you're first vaccinated, you make a really good antibody response. And antibodies are sticky molecules that float around in your blood, and they neutralize things that shouldn't be there. You make them in response to vaccine, you make them in response to infection. But they don't hang around forever, and your body doesn't waste time making something it doesn't think it needs. So unsurprisingly, as time ticks by, you slowly lose the level of antibody you make. As the level falls, your susceptibility to infection increases, but your level of or threshold at which you can get infected that you need to get below is higher than the threshold at which you will develop severe disease. So you're initially protected really well against infection and severe disease, but as the level of antibody declines, you may then slip down so you can catch the infection, but you're still defended against becoming severely unwell. And that's sort of the situation that the majority of the world population are now in, having confronted COVID for real, in many cases off the back of vaccination.
Is there a danger with what's happening in the Far East at the moment, and given the actions that we've seen from the Americans, from the Italians and others, is there any evidence that this could be a new variant?
Well, the data we have so far, and many people are very cautious about what the Chinese tell us, because we know that they haven't been forthcoming with the information on many fronts, on many occasions over many years. But what we do know is that they're dealing with an Omicron variant, which is the same one that the rest of the world is contending with to greater or lesser extents. We don't think it's specifically the virus at this stage that's doing anything different. It is the fact that they've got a highly susceptible population, many of them unvaccinated. It's that log pile which is just tinned to dry and ready to go up like an inferno. That's what's causing it. The worry is, will this turn into something else? The worry is, will this elaborate because of the scale of the outbreak, new versions or new variants of the virus, in the same way as we've had the Kent variant, now known as Alpha, the variants from different parts of the world that have cropped up. Will that happen with China? Will we get that missing Z variant that the WHO diplomatically skipped over to avoid offending anybody? It would be ironic, wouldn't it? But we don't know at this stage. What I will say is that I think it's unlikely that this is going to happen, because what causes viruses to evolve is to surmount some kind of barrier, and that barrier is immunity in the human population. And what China haven't got is a huge amount of immunity. So there isn't the selective pressure on the virus to turn into something that will defeat a vaccine.
I get the point. Chris, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to speed with that, and let's hope that Chris is right. All I can say is if we get another major outbreak, no more lockdowns. I don't care what the circumstances are. Never, ever again. On that sobering thought, let's take a break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, in this period between Christmas and New Year, it was the think tank CEBR that made the running and many of the headlines by telling us just what Jeremy Hunt's tax proposals were going to mean for the average family. You know, the unbelievable £40,000 that two middle earners extra in tax could have to pay over the course of the next decade. Well, Kay Nuffield is head of forecasting at the aforesaid organisation, because they'd also told us some time back, and I was very surprised when I first heard this, that actually, in relative terms, the UK was doing well and our economy would outgrow Germany's over the course of the next couple of decades. But I understand that that forecast has now been reversed. Kay Nuffield, please tell us what's going wrong with the British economy? Why has that forecast had to change?
Yeah, that's correct. So according to our latest World Economic League table, we do have downgraded the UK growth prospects There's a couple of things to consider here. One is the short-term outlook and the current performance of the UK economy. The other one being the longer-term performance, the long-term growth outlook. On the short-term performance, we do see that the UK is struggling more with the global economic headwinds that we're seeing. That is high inflation, higher interest rates. So the UK has, as one of the only G7 economies, seen a contraction in GDP in the third quarter. And we do actually believe that the UK is going to remain in recession until the middle of next year. And that is coming on top of a position where the UK is also the only G7 country that is not recovered to levels of GDP pre-pandemic. So all the other G7 countries have achieved that. And that is linked to kind of the longer term structural problems of the UK, that is low business investment, a weak export growth, and that is holding back productivity growth. And that's why basically we had to downgrade the UK growth forecast.
How damaging, I mean, and congratulations to you guys for making the running this week with the news agenda, which you really have, actually, with your tax forecasts. Just how damaging to Britain's position and to her internal economy, just how damaging are tax rises on the middle classes of this magnitude?
Well, in the UK, really, the middle classes, lower earners as well, are really, bearing the brunt of the cost of living squeeze that we're seeing at the moment. And it's coming from all sides. It's coming from higher interest rates, which are necessary to fight inflation, but it nevertheless hurts the disposable income of mortgage holders, of prospective house buyers. And it also comes, of course, in the form of higher taxes that we're seeing. Additionally, I think it's also a very UK-specific factor that there's a lot of instability in the political field, of course, and you've seen, going from a Liz Truss's tax-cutting agenda within 3 weeks, we are back to fiscal consolidation under Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak, and I think that is hurting confidence in the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us all the way from the Canaries, and thank you for the work that you do. Thank you very much indeed. Well, at What the Farage moment, we learn that the 4 people involved with protecting our borders, working from the Home Office down in Kent, in Dover and Manston, 4 people have been arrested. One of them because they're here illegally. We have an illegal immigrant working for the Home Office dealing with illegal immigration, and the other 3 have been arrested on conspiracy to steal. Now, there's been all sorts of toing and froing on this earlier on today, but conspiracy to steal is no better than, frankly, being here illegally. Quite how we can be in such a mess down in Dover, I simply don't know. And a final What the Farage, well, KSI has this massive following in this country. I went to watch him box just recently, amateur boxing down at the O2. And, of course, the drink that he's involved with and promotes, Prime, well, Aldi tweeted out last night that Prime would now be on sale in their stores. And it has been bedlam up and down the country. People fighting to get hold of their £1.99 bottles of Prime drink. Absolutely extraordinary scenes in Aldi all over the country. Says 2 things to me. Number 1, the star power that exists in a modern celebrity world. And, of course, FOMO, fear of missing out. In a moment, we're going to talk to the leader of a new political party, the Climate Party. But why do we need it when we've got a Green Party already?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's my last Talking Pints of the year. And I've got to tell you, I love the optimism of people who set up new political parties. I love it, because there have been scores of them over the course of the last 20, 30 years. And nearly all just disappear without trace. The odd one, of course, does lead to an insurgency and make a bit of a difference. But the optimism, I love it. I admire it. Whether I agree with their politics isn't the point. But Ed Gemmell, who joins me for Talking Pints, and welcome to the programme.
Nice to see you.
Now, you've set up the Climate Party.
Yes.
So I think to myself, whoa, hang on. Oh, by the way, confession from me. Confession to all of you.
Always good to have a confession.
I voted Green in 1989 in the European elections, and I did so because it was run by a fellow called Jonathan Porritt, who I thought was actually a pretty sound, solid, sensible guy. I always believed in conservation, and they were Eurosceptic. They were worried about the exploding global population and what the impact of that was going to be on the environment. So, you know, I actually have some sympathies with genuine environmentalism. But given that we have a Green Party, given that the Conservatives are sort of vote blue, go green, the Saudi Arabia of wind, given that the whole of Westminster is signed up to this agenda, why the Climate Party?
Well, obviously we set it up so that you'd have somewhere to vote when you come up to the next election, because I didn't want you to waste your potentially greenish vote.
Very good of you.
But the particular reason is, from the scientific point of view, we've run out of time. But we don't even have to look at that. This is the biggest business opportunity on the entire planet. I mean, look, we've just had the CEBR talking about Britain being downgraded. So Britain's prospects now downgraded. We're doing the wrong thing. We haven't got the right leadership driving us forward, and we can see this fantastic commercial opportunity coming down the road at the moment.
Right, so the Green Party are pretty anti-business, it's always seemed to me, although they talk about the Green Revolution and green, they all talk about green jobs. Every country that's put into place a big move to renewables has seen, a few jobs on wind farms and things like that, but have seen mass closures of manufacturing and many other parts, many other sectors. Going green has cost jobs, going green has cost a fortune to consumers, to manufacturers. So you're basically saying that you're a sort of right-wing version of the Green Party.
Oh, yeah. We're centre-right, pro-business, pro-climate.
All right, fine. Let's start with business.
OK.
You tell me how a net zero agenda can be good for the economy.
Well, I think the first thing is how could a net zero agenda not be good for the economy? I mean, currently, when we do solar panels, we buy them from China.
Yep.
Why? We should be doing them here. Everything we're doing currently, we've got the target too far out. It's too far away for us to really start working on it. When I do speeches in the city, in Olympia, in Excel, at business events and all that sort of thing, and we talk about Britain leading the decarbonisation revolution, I mean, actually getting in there, getting our hands dirty,
hang on, Boris,
innovating and actually leading
Hang on, whoa a second. We have cut CO2 emissions more than any other developed country in the world, 44% down since 1990. Do you know how we've done it? By deindustrialising.
Yeah, but hang on, you're already talking on CO2 emissions. We haven't even got there yet, Nigel. We'll get there in a minute. Let's talk about the business opportunity.
Right, so
Britain should actually be leading
so we can manufacture,
rather than dragging our heels.
Right, so you're saying we can manufacture solar panels?
We can manufacture everything if we need to do it and if we've got the opportunity to scale it. So if we take a proper scientific target in relation, and we're purists on the science, there is nothing beyond decarbonisation in 2030 that will keep us safe. That's absolutely what comes out of all of the science at the moment. Now, 2050 net zero, before you even remind me of it, is not just greenwash, it's hogwash. We will not be safe if the most sophisticated, commercially able countries go for 2050.
So
that is not the aim.
You think we can play God? You think by reducing CO2 a little bit in the United Kingdom we can change the weather?
I'm certainly not suggesting we play God, and I wouldn't at all be saying something like that. What I do think we do is we can take matters into our own hands and get on with some work. Now, what's been happening at the moment, and I know you talk about CO2 emissions, so yes, nature pumps a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere.
Far more than we do.
Of course, because there's a carbon cycle, Nigel, so it's just like a company that has sales and costs. So the costs are putting the CO2 out into the atmosphere, and the sales are when it's in the carbon cycle and it goes back into the earth and into the plants and everything else, called the carbon cycle. Now, the extra bit is the bit of debt is where we're going out and pumping extra CO2 into the atmosphere.
About 3%.
And that's 3 to 5%. But I mean, that's irrelevant. But in actual fact, do you actually know, Nigel, the increase in CO2 in the atmosphere since the start of the Industrial Revolution? Do you know what the percentage is?
Yeah, I've seen these exponential graphs.
Right.
But I've also seen...
1 second.
But I've also
it's 50%.
I've also seen in previous millennia through rocks, there have been times of massive increases in carbon dioxide as well. All I would say to you is this. You know, have CO2 emissions gone up? Man-made CO2, particles in the air. Is it up? Yes, we can measure that, absolutely. There is some scientific doubt, you know, actually, as to how much of that man has genuinely caused.
No, there isn't. I mean, no, the science is done.
There are plenty of scientists who query this, all right?
There are not plenty. There is a handful of those who make their money by being contrarians who query it. They are not serious scientists. The IPCC, 200 top scientists were the most conservative body in the entire world.
Well, the IPCC was set up to prove a theory. It wasn't set up to have a genuine debate.
Rubbish. It was set up to analyse the science, analyse those scientific papers that came out and reach a conclusion on it. And when they reach a conclusion on it, it's a conservative conclusion, firstly, because it's a compromise, and they always take the less earth-shattering, worrying conclusion. The second bit is before those things even come out, they're modified by governments who comment on them. So you get up to 200 governments commenting, and governments are never commenting saying, oh, let's go harder and faster.
You genuinely think, Ed Gamble, you genuinely think we're headed for increased temperatures and a real catastrophe?
Well, I don't think I have to actually say very much. We had increased temperatures here in the UK this year, which
1976.
Well, always hark back to that. But eight of the hottest years on record are in the last decade, and that's not just happening here. That's happening around the planet. And whatever you say about 76, I mean, when the chief of the fire service in London says that this is the worst day for fires in the UK, in London since World War II, that says something. That's the direction we're in. I mean, when you also look at the figures,
every weather event is taken to be, it means a disaster. You know, I mean, we got a huge 70-odd people dead in America over the course of the last few days with these horrendous blizzards that are going on. You know, we get big weather events. Look, I tell you what, for the sake of this debate,
yes,
I understand your position. You believe in it, right? And I respect that. You know, I've got questions around it, but I respect that. And it's very, very important in politics that we actually come to a position where we do respect the right of other people to have different points of view. I hate this leftist, I disagree with you, therefore I want to silence you. And on this show, you know, we get people on with all shades of opinion. So let's take that as a given. And let's take as a given that you've got an economic agenda to put forward here. How are you going to make it work, Ed? How are you going to make it work? How are you? Because you know you'll have Greens standing in that constituency as well. Where else have you seen a movement like yours succeed electorally?
Well, the Teals have just done it in Australia. I'm sure you already know about that.
They're sort of like Liberal Democrats.
They took 7 seats in deeply conservative areas from ministers and others in the Conservative parties there. And they did it in the most extraordinary circumstances. Climate was their number one issue. And then integrity in politics. Look, we hope that we're representing integrity in politics as well, which has been seriously lacking in this country for a while now. And then the third part is they took inclusiveness. But they took climate as the number one, integrity as the number two. And they wiped out a number of the Conservative Party members.
They did. It was very interesting. They did well in the sort of wealthy Sydney suburbs.
That's right.
A sort of upper middle class, sort of Chelsea, Kensington type, sort of London analogy. They were like Liberal Democrats, effectively.
I would say they're very much more climate conscious Conservatives. I mean, we're in touch with them, we're talking to them. So, I mean, in terms of strategy, we'll be bringing as much as we can to play here.
How many seats are you going to stand in?
Currently, and I'll be looking forward to your advice on this maybe in the future as you have so much experience in this. But currently we're taking on the Conservatives in 110 seats. So we're aiming at their 100 most marginal seats, and you'll appreciate, because our voting system is very different to the one in Australia, that we have to look at a different strategy. So we're taking on the Conservatives in their 100 most marginal seats. We're also going to take on the climate deniers from the Conservative Party in Parliament, of which is about 19. So we'll take them on. That roughly overlaps to about 110. I know that the seats are changing a little bit at the moment with the Electoral Commission, but that's roughly the numbers that we're going to be doing.
And you took on Steve Baker at the last election.
I did, at the point of knowing nothing about politics and nothing about climate. I really just got started.
How many votes?
Do you want me to count them all up on one hand or not? I mean, as a complete noob, the whole point of standing was to get climate onto the agenda.
Yeah. Hey, we did this with UKIP. We were effectively a pressure group that fought elections as a means of getting our message out to a wider public. It's exactly what we did. That changed as the years went on.
Look, there is a label that a member of the media has actually called us UKIP for climate. Now,
OK.
Don't go out saying it myself, but that came out of somebody in the media.
So should Steve Baker be worried?
Well, I think with Steve Baker, he's got a very small margin. Not only that, he's now standing against me, and I'm now a councillor elected in the area. I got elected only on climate in a deeply Conservative area. Managed to push 2 Conservatives out, and now I've got 18 months to 24 months. Plus, I'm backed. So I have proper backers to back me to remove Steve Baker in Wickham, and you're going to have one of the arch climate deniers here standing against the leader of the Climate Party.
Ed Gamble, you believe in what you're doing. You're playing your part in the democratic process. I have great respect for you for doing so, and thank you for sharing your
Nigel.
views
Nice to be
on
here with
Talking
you.
Pints. Thank you. OK, it's time for Barrage the Farage. Veronica says, with the Chinese New Year holidays coming up soon, could we have another coronavirus pandemic? So, yeah, the Chinese New Year, I think, is on the 22nd of January. It's estimated that 400 million Chinese people will be on the move around China. And it was that Chinese New Year period that led to some of the mass spread that happened in early 2020. I'm fearful that the coronavirus ghost is coming back. I really am. But I'm determined that whatever they try to do, if this mob want to lock us down again, yeah, Matt Hancock may have gone, but they're still the same sort of players. We must never allow this to happen again. Brian asks me, do you think Brexit has moved any further forward in the last year? No, it's moved backwards, Brian, actually, because the Conservatives haven't delivered on so many of the things that people wanted, that it's leading, even to people like me, saying, we're disappointed with the way Brexit's going. They've done an absolutely rotten job. Ron says, is it possible for the Reform Party to win the next election, or at least beat the Tories? History says no, but who's to say? And Sue asks, what is your ideal New Year's Eve? 10-second answer, going to ask Ed Gamble. New Year's Eve, what do you want to do?
New Year's Eve, what I want to do, be with a bunch of great people in a building fueled by renewables, dancing away to the early hours.
They can't help them.
New Zealand's Prime Minister.
They can't help themselves, you see, they're obsessed. They're obsessed. Ideally, New Year's Eve, well, a pub that serves decent beer, but it's not too rowdy. Well, that's it. That's my last show of the year for GB News. I want to wish all of you a very, very happy new year. We're going to face the most extraordinary political and, I suspect, economic problems, certainly in the first half of next year and maybe into the last half too. My best to all of you. I'm handing you over now to Tanya Buxton.
Hello, we have got such a fantastic jam-packed show for you this evening. We're going to be talking Jamie Oliver and sugar taxes. We're going to be talking about Afghanistan and educating women. And we're also going to be supping some delicious white English wines. But first, here's the weather.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir with your weather update. An amber warning for heavy rain has been issued across the southern parts of Scotland, a broad yellow warning for rain, Northern Ireland, central and southern areas of Scotland, and a warning for snow and ice across northern Scotland. Yes, the weather remains unsettled and cold in places, particularly in the north. One area of low pressure clearing towards the far north, another one approaching from the west. And this is an area of heavy rain, which will track across Northern Ireland, clipping northern England and pushing towards Scotland. At the same time, rain will approach Wales as well as the West Country as the winds pick up some strength. And the winds will be a feature of the weather through the first part of Friday. Severe gales across the North Channel, gales across Irish sea coast as well as Channel coast, and a wet and windy start to the day. So that amber warning reflects the fact that there's going to be issues on the roads with surface water, high rainfall totals. We could actually see some flooding here, so a risk of some really quite torrential rain for a time, but it clears quite quickly. By lunchtime, most places seeing some drier skies away from Shetland as well as Orkney, although a legacy of showers will arrive across Northern Ireland and Scotland through the afternoon. A blustery breeze here, a few showers running in across the southeast of England. Now overnight, some clearer skies yet again across more southern areas. Still icy across the far north of Scotland with the risk of snow above around 200 metres. And then some sporadic bursts of rain come in from the west across many parts as we head into the early hours of New Year's Eve. So still unsettled for the last day of 2022. Rain comes and goes through the day on New Year's Eve. Still a keen breeze coming in from the southwest. Even so, Scotland and Northern Ireland will remain cold. And through the day, the rain will intensify across more southern areas. A blustery day wherever you are, with showers to follow across more western areas, but even a little sunshine to end 2022 for Northern Ireland. Temperatures then will struggle in the north, milder in the south. And here's your outlook into the beginning of 2023. Dry skies on Monday with even some sunshine.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Mark Steyn Show. I'm Tonya Buxton and once again it is my privilege to be warming Mark's seat, and I wanted to also restate my wishes to him and his family. Coming up tonight, we're taking a look at Jamie Oliver's calls for a sugar tax to be used to fund the extension of free school meals. As a cook, this one really matters to me, but I'm a bit sceptical when it comes to the government telling us how and what to eat, considering their disastrous track record. Weight loss expert Steve Miller joins me shortly. Someone has been fined for catcalling, and we wanted to ask society, have we become too sensitive? Can we really legislate and grapple with the complexities of courtship? Nilali Dowding will be here to weigh in and give her opinions. As the Taliban continue their relentless war on women and those who choose to protest against the headscarves in